On Tuesday evening, hours before Trump's latest deadline was due to expire, the US and Iran suddenly announced that they'd agreed a 2-week ceasefire. This came as a relief to, well, basically everyone. But unfortunately for everyone, it looks like it's already coming apart. So in this video, we're going to explain why the ceasefire is coming under strain, whether it can hold, and what happens if it doesn't. On the night of the 2024 US election, Donald Trump told his supporters that God had saved his life for a reason, alluding to the assassination attempt on his life a few months earlier. In the latest issue of Too Long, we explore how faith-fueled populism, from Donald Trump to Vladimir Putin, has slowly been shaping modern democracy. That's just some of the 72 pages in the magazine, because as always, there's more to Too Long than you'd expect. Purchase your copy by clicking the link in the description. So, let's get straight into it. As we see it, there are basically three things currently straining the ceasefire. The first is that Iran and its neighbours have continued to trade fire, albeit at a lower frequency since the ceasefire was announced. A refinery on Iran's Lavon Island was apparently hit by a drone in the early hours of Wednesday morning, while another drone apparently entered into Iranian airspace around the city of La a few hours later. On the other side of the ledger, Kuwait said that its air defences intercepted at least 28 drones from Iran throughout Wednesday. The UAE said that its defence systems were responding to a missile threat, and Saudi Arabia announced that its east-west pipeline was hit by what looks like a drone at about 1 PM on Wednesday. For context, the east-west pipeline cuts across Saudi Arabia, from the city of Bakik to the port of Yanbu on the Red Sea, and has become particularly important in recent weeks as the Saudis have used it to redirect oil exports out of the Red Sea while the Strait of Hormuz stays closed. Now, there might be a relatively innocent explanation here. It might just be that orders are taking a bit of time to trickle down to the lower layers of the Iranian military and its proxies, in which case we should expect the frequency of strikes to flatline in the near future. Alternatively, however, this could be hardline elements within the Iranian state, and especially the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, trying to intentionally undermine the ceasefire. This would be consistent with a recent report from the Financial Times, which claimed that Trump was actually the one to ask for the ceasefire in the first place. But while Iran's foreign minister was open to it, hardliners in the IRGC were very resistant to the idea and wanted to continue fighting instead. If this is the case, then continued ceasefire violations might prove harder to stamp out. Anyway, the second thing putting a strain on the ceasefire is a disagreement over the degree to which Iran is obligated to open the Strait of Hormuz. And this was pretty foreseeable to anyone who actually read the two sides' respective readouts when the ceasefire was announced. Trump's Truth Social post claimed that the ceasefire was contingent on the, quote, complete, immediate and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz. But the Iranian readout stated that Iran had only agreed to, quote, safe passage via coordination with the Iranian armed forces. As we noted in yesterday's video, this is almost the exact same language that the Iranian Foreign Ministry used in a statement last month, when it announced that vessels from non-hostile states will be allowed to pass through, quote, in coordination with the Iranian authorities. In that case, this didn't mean a total reopening of the strait at all. Rather, in coordination with the Iranian authorities, meant that these ships had to pass through Iran's heavily militarized Qeshm and Arak islands, with many of them paying a multi-million-dollar toll for passage. Somewhat unsurprisingly, it turns out that Iran is envisioning a similar setup this time around. On Wednesday, for instance, a spokesperson for Iran's Oil, Gas and Petrochemical Products Exporters Union, which is closely aligned with the Iranian state, told the Financial Times that Iran will be collecting a toll equivalent to $1 per barrel of oil to be paid in Bitcoin from any passing tanker, and that Iran would be assessing each ship to make sure that it wasn't carrying weapons, implying that all traffic would thus have to transit between Qeshm and Arak. And this is exactly what's happened. The first ships to pass through since the ceasefire did indeed pass through Qeshm and Arak, and the number of ships passing through actually fell from 11 on Tuesday, before the ceasefire, to just 4 on Wednesday, according to ship tracking data. Unsurprisingly, this hasn't gone down well with the US, not least because it will probably keep oil prices elevated for the foreseeable future. The third thing straining the ceasefire is a disagreement over its scope, and specifically whether it covers Israel's ongoing war against Hezbollah in Lebanon. The original post announcing the ceasefire by Pakistan's Prime Minister said that it did, but Israel has since claimed that it doesn't. And on Wednesday, the IDF carried out its largest wave of airstrikes yet, killing at least 200 people. Iranian officials responded furiously, On Wednesday night, their foreign minister posted on X that the US must choose between ceasefire or continued war via Israel, while the Speaker of Iran's parliament put out a statement announcing that in such a situation, negotiation is unreasonable. The US was originally conspicuously silent on this question, but late on Wednesday evening, Vice President J.D. Vance claimed that while there had apparently been, in his words, a legitimate misunderstanding, the ceasefire did not in fact include Lebanon.
Well, first of all, I know there's been some conversations between the Israelis and the leadership of our country today. I haven't been involved in that because I've been busy doing stuff in Hungary. I'm actually supposed to get an update when I get on the plane. But let me say a couple things. First of all, I actually think, and there's a lot of bad faith negotiation and a lot of bad faith, propaganda going on. I think this comes from a legitimate misunderstanding. I think the Iranians thought that the ceasefire included Lebanon, and it just didn't. We never made that promise. We never indicated that was going to be the case. What we said is that the ceasefire would be focused on Iran, and the ceasefire would be focused on America's allies, both Israel and the Gulf Arab states.
To be fair to Iran here, it's hard to see how this legitimate misunderstanding could have actually arisen, given that not only was Lebanon indeed explicitly included in Pakistan's original statement, but also that, well, it looks a lot like the statement was literally drafted by the US. For starters, if you look at the post-draft history, you can see that it was originally titled Pakistan's PM message on X, which suggests that it was sent to the Pakistani Prime Minister via a foreign government, presumably the US. This would be consistent with the Financial Times report we mentioned earlier, which, citing 5 people familiar with negotiations, claimed that the US decided to use Pakistan as a conduit on the grounds that they believed Iran would be more likely to respond favorably to an outreach from a relatively neutral Muslim-majority state. Rather, what seems to have happened here is that the US did originally include Lebanon in the ceasefire, but before they got Israel's agreement. And when Israel saw the ceasefire, they basically said, "We'll agree to the Iran bit, but not the Lebanon bit." Again, this would be consistent with a recent report from the Wall Street Journal, which claims that Israel was not included in the ceasefire negotiations and only given last-minute notice. Unfortunately for anyone who wants a ceasefire to stick, it's hard to see Netanyahu backing down here, both because military escalation is his modus operandi, and because the news of the ceasefire has gone down terribly in Israel, with the opposition leader Yair Lapid describing it as an unprecedented political disaster. So if the ceasefire does collapse, what happens next? Well, all parties have said that they're ready to return to war, and this does look like the most likely outcome. However, recent events also strongly suggest that Trump desperately wants an off-ramp, and it's not hard to imagine him declaring victory and just getting out. As we mentioned earlier, the latest version of our magazine, Too Long, is out now. And if you subscribe using code TLDR26, then you can get £4 off your first copy, bringing the price as low as $3.99, our lowest ever price, as well as getting you 20% off every future issue as long as you stay subscribed. Speaking of future editions, let me show you, for the very first time, this summer's edition of the magazine, currently entitled Trump's Rules of War. This map on the cover shows a dot for every region struck by Trump since returning to office last year, and there's always the chance that it will look even redder before we go to print. Inside this issue, we'll be running through each of the different conflicts, airstrikes, and incursions.
A little excursion to take care of nuclear weaponry?
Sorry, excursions. So if you want to track that timeline with us and better understand what's motivating Trump here, then you'll want a copy of this summer's Too Long. We'll be discussing that along with a whole load of other topics. Luckily, if you subscribe today, you'll not only get the spring issue immediately, but you'll also be signed up for this summer too, ensuring that this issue lands through your letterbox or in your inbox as soon as possible.